Right. Looks like we are live. Greetings, everybody. Chuck Holton here, coming to you from Armenia for the last day, at least for a while. Tomorrow, we're going to be heading back to my home in Panama, which I haven't seen in about 3 months. So I'm really looking forward to that. If I get a chance to do a live tomorrow night, it will be from Barcelona because we have a layover there. So you may hear from me from Spain tomorrow. I wanted to say congratulations to Mama Rissa for her, it looks like her baby getting baptized, her son getting baptized. And I'm I'm sure you are super proud. There's not much better than watching your children make the decision to follow the Lord. So congratulations to you for that. Thank you all for being here, PC. Thank you for that donation before we even got started. Get us off on the right foot tonight. So we're going to be talking about making the case for striking cartels and narco traffickers across the globe, start dropping warheads on foreheads so that we can actually make a difference in the number of opioid deaths and drug overdoses that we see in the United States on a yearly basis that, previous governments before President Trump took office have just sort of accepted. Oh, we got 100,000 people a year being killed by drug overdoses. Oh, well, there is something we can do about it. And I'm going to make the case for why we should and talk to you a little bit about the preparations that the US government is making to actually do that, to actually go kinetic on Mexican drug cartels, Colombian drug cartels, Venezuelan drug cartels, and anybody else that gets in the way. So we got a lot to get through tonight. If you have questions, put it over in the chat and I'll get to your questions at the end as best I can. Please make sure you hit the like button as well while you're at it and post in the chat where you're watching from. That's really fun to look at, to see where just people coming in from all over the globe. It's just amazing. As a matter of fact, there was somebody watching last night from right here in Vanadzor, Armenia. I didn't know I had any fans here in Vanadzor except for my wife and my kids, since they get paid to help out with this channel. Yeah. And so we've been having a great time here in Armenia, and I'm kind of sad to leave, but it's time to go. I got to get home and see my dogs and my monkeys and sleep in my own bed for once. So why should America treat cartels as enemy terrorist forces? Let's call it what it is. Transnational narco trafficking organizations, I guess, if you want to call them that, are not just criminal syndicates. They're foreign, armed, revenue rich, networked organizations that are killing Americans at scale. I mean, imagine if Russia invaded the United States and killed 100,000 of our people. There would, we'd have the entire military mobilized and fighting against Russia. Imagine if China or somebody was, pumping drugs into our country to kill our people. Oh yeah, wait, they are doing that. So the body count can't be understated. Now, overdose deaths went down pretty sharply last year over the year before, almost 27%. But that's it dropping from 110,000 to 80,000 in a year is still 80,000 dead Americans. Do you know how many Americans died in the Vietnam War? Put your guess in the chat. Now you can Google it and yeah, I'm sure somebody can Google it, but don't Google it. Just off the top of your head, how many Americans died in the Vietnam War? How many Americans died in 5 years of fighting in World War II? Pick a number. And whatever number we go with, either the World War II numbers or the uh, numbers from Vietnam, or how many Americans do you think died in the entirety of the global war on terror from 2000 to 2020? In 20 years of war, how many Americans died? Well, it turns out that we almost have, well, as many Americans, we actually have more Americans dying every month of drug overdoses than we had die in all of the war in Iraq or Afghanistan separately. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So the correct numbers are, I think it's 50, what is it, 51,000 or 56,000, something like that, died in Vietnam. Somebody said 60,000. You're pretty close. In World War II, it was like 438,000 Americans died. Uh, well, in the last 4 years, we've had more Americans than that die in the United States from drug overdoses. So, I mean, we could stop right there. I mean, that is all the proof we need that the, you know, cartels need to be treated like warring parties. Okay. I mean, they are a national security threat. Now, fentanyl is the number one driver so far of these overdose deaths, and this mostly comes in via Mexico. The DEA reports attribute most illicitly manufactured fentanyl smuggled into the U.S. to cartel productions in Mexico. And they use precursor chemicals that they got mostly from China. So, and actually to a lesser extent, India. So that right there should be considered an act of war by not just the CJNG or the other Sinaloa cartels or anybody like that, but from China and India as well. Do you think China sells those precursor chemicals in industrial scale bulk to Mexico and has no idea what it's going to be used for? Think again. Now, the seizures on the U.S. southern border illustrate the scale and momentum of this problem. The CBP last year seized, well, fiscal year 2023, which, okay, anyway, seized 27,000 pounds of fentanyl. That's a modern record. Nearly 22,000 pounds in 2024. And the CBP said that 16,000 pounds by the end of August. I'm sorry, 19,600 pounds by the end of August 2024 alone. So, I mean, that is industrial scale trafficking. That's not street corner crime or anything like that. And the lethality of these drugs is off the charts. DEA's lab testing has found that 6 of 10 fentanyl laced fake pills carry a potentially lethal dose, 60%. And this is why it worried me so much about my kids living in West Virginia, growing up in West Virginia, getting a hold of just, I mean, all it takes is one pill, dead, just like that. We have police officers that died just from getting a whiff of some of this stuff that they pick up. So this is not business. We can't just look at this like, well, it's just business. No, this is deliberate mass poisoning for profit. Now, cartel distribution is national. It's all over the country. As a matter of fact, I have a map here that shows, let's see here if I can find that, my map. Drug flows into the United States coming up through, uh, you see that it mostly skips around Central America, goes mostly to Mexico, and then up into the United States. And from there into Canada, with a little bit going directly to Canada and then coming back into the United States from Canada. A lot of this is actually coming out of Venezuela and not just Colombia. So, we're talking about major drug flows here. I mean, as I said, industrial scale. And when 2 milligrams of fentanyl can kill somebody, you're talking about they're picking up tens of thousands of pounds of fentanyl every year. That's enough to kill everybody in the United States multiple times over. And these guys are not just, the cartels are not just operating in Mexico or in Colombia. They are operating in every state in the US. And these are not mere gangs. They're paramilitary actors. You look at what happens in Mexico, the tactics and weaponry that the CJNG and rival groups are using. They've got armored convoys, belt-fed machine guns, 50 caliber machine guns. They're weaponizing drones. They're setting up IEDs. There've been hundreds of drone attacks documented by Mexico's defense ministry in just the first half of 2024. So this is beyond an insurgency. These guys are not just gangs living in Mexico. They are owning parts of Mexico. They are holding territory in Mexico. There are places in Mexico where the government forces cannot go. I have a friend who was a uh, missionary in Mexico, and he said he was a missionary in an area where they grew a lot of the marijuana and stuff that was going to the United States, completely controlled by the cartels. And he said, well, they have actually respect for uh, anybody that is attached to the church because they're very superstitious and they have their own saints and they pray before they transport their drugs and all that kind of stuff. So they didn't bother him too much, but his house was hit by gunfire and from time to time got caught in the crossfire. And as his daughters got old enough, they came of age, then he started getting real worried because those cartel kingpins would just show up and say, she's cute, she's mine, thank you very much, and take her, and we won't kill you. Uh, and so he actually ended up having to leave Mexico and work remotely just for the safety of his daughters. Now, I mean, we're making the case here that the cartels need to be dealt with and taken down by the United States. And let me tell you something. Cartels make billions of dollars on this business of theirs. And how do they transport a lot of that money back down to Mexico and points beyond? Well, gold. Cartels love gold. Why? Because it's basically money without a passport. You can't exactly haul a duffel bag stuffed with cash through an airport customs without having to do some serious splaining. But with gold, you could easily carry 10 grand, or let's just say $9,900 just to be safe, in your pocket through airports and everything without anybody knowing it, because it's worth so much, over $3,300 an ounce now. Gold is universal, it's portable, and banks can't freeze it. So that's why narcos use it to move millions across borders. But here's the kicker. You don't have to be a drug kingpin to want wealth that you can hold on to. In fact, you don't need a bunch of henchmen or blacked out SUVs to have it either. For regular folks, Washington is spending your savings into oblivion, and that's exactly why gold makes sense for you too. Now, let's be honest. The dollar is, I would say, on life support. Inflation's eating your paycheck alive. The national debt's too big to even contemplate. And banks are about as trustworthy as the politicians who serve them. So if you're just sitting there with your money in cash or stocks and bonds, you're basically volunteering to get robbed slowly by the biggest cartel of all, the US government. So that's why I use preserved gold. They make it stupid simple to own real gold and silver, actual physical stuff, not gold flavored stocks or some crypto token that some teenager dreamed up in a basement. I'm talking about coins and bars you can stack and hold. And if you've got a retirement account, you can still put physical gold in there as well. Here's how that works. You can roll part of your IRA or 401k into a gold IRA, totally tax and penalty free, or just start small. Preserve Gold will ship you gold and silver directly directly to your home. And so in so doing, you can get started. And look, gold has outlasted every empire, every dictator, and it'll outlast every cartel too. Preserve Gold will help you get some of your own easily without a bunch of runaround before the dollar tanks any further. So text the word Chuck to 50505 or go to preservegold.com/hot zone, that link there on the screen. And don't wait until your savings account is worth less than a Venezuelan peso to do it. If you've got a retirement account, it's a good time to take a look at our sponsor. And we want to say thank you to them for their generous sponsorship of our podcast, keeping us out in the field and doing what we're doing. So go to preservegold.com/hot zone. Tell them we sent you. All right. So the cartels have been engaging, again, not just in the incredible amount of brutal violence south of the border, but they've also been engaging in intimidation and attacks on U.S. interests. The U.S. consulate in Nuevo Laredo has repeatedly had to lock down because there were gunfights out in front of the consulate. And they've even had direct fire incidents. Cartels kidnapped 4 Americans in Matamoros in 2023 and killed 2 of those guys. Back in 2011, Los Zetas gunmen murdered Jaime Zapata, who was an ICE special agent that was working undercover in Mexico on official duty. Those aren't local crimes. These are attacks on U.S. nationals and facilities. And up till this point, very little has been done to take direct action against them. So we can't overlook the strategic destabilization that's going on right next door any longer. Mexico has had hundreds of thousands of homicides since 2006. Over 110,000 people have been disappeared. And the violence is ramping up almost every week. Oh, really? There's baby girl. She agrees. Uh, so cartel business is a national level warfare against the United States on the cheap. And it's being encouraged by countries like Russia and China. Not just encouraged, but facilitated, because those that instability on our southern border makes it easier for terror groups like Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran to get agents into the United States. The U.S. retail drug market is routinely estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Imagine the not just the money that's spent on drugs, but the loss of human potential from all the drugs flooding our streets. It's not, look, a lot of people think, hey, people don't, get held down and forced to take drugs by and large. It's largely something people choose to do. So we're creating the demand for the drugs. So it's our fault. That's essentially the case that Mexico makes whenever we criticize Mexico for the drug problem. Mexico says, well, there wouldn't be a problem if you didn't have a demand. Yes. However, we support a safe house for recovering addicts in Beckley, West Virginia. It's called Brian's Safe House. And it was started by a guy named Leon Brush, whose son, Brian, was a good kid, working, doing tiling floors, doing stuff like that. And he hurt his back and he had a breakup with his girlfriend and he was kind of depressed and he lived above, I don't know, in kind of a bad neighborhood, was living in an apartment by himself. And I don't know if it was his friend or his neighbor or somebody said, "Oh, your back hurts here. You ought to take one of these." And whatever they gave him, I think it was heroin. Uh, he was hooked just like that. And his life spiraled down and down and down out of control until eventually he overdosed and killed himself. Now, Leon Brush has dedicated his life to honoring the memory of his son by trying to make sure that that doesn't happen to anybody else. And they have saved dozens, if not hundreds, of lives over the past 10, 15 years with their program, which is heavily centered around Christian values and personal accountability and hard work, things like that. It's actually a free uh, program. People don't have to pay to send their kids there. They have several businesses that they've started, and they hire out, for construction or plumbing or electrical and stuff like that. And the money that the business makes helps to support the safe house. But they always need to expand, and they can do a lot more if they had more money. So they do accept donations, and we have given for years to the safe house. And just I've spent a lot of time up there. I've gone up there and spoken and done Bible studies with the guys at the safe house. And I'll tell you, you hear their stories. This is just in one small part of West Virginia. And it really it drives the point home to you that these guys are not bad guys that just, that went out and just looking to do drugs. By and large, a lot of them had it given to them at one point or another by somebody they trusted, and they got hooked. And actually, these guys, once they get clean and they realize what they have been saved from, they become some of the most amazing young men I have ever met. And I have hired them. I've offered them jobs. I mean, these guys, they do great work. They're amazing. If I hire them to come do something at my place in West Virginia, I can rest assured it's going to get done right. Okay. So yes, America bears some blame for creating the demand for this poison, but the demand is fed by the supply. And if the supply dried up, the demand would dry up too. The demand's not going to just continue to grow if there's less drugs available. So we need to do something about this. And like I said, if there were a foreign terrorist organization, let's say ISIS, established themselves in Mexico, and they started kidnapping and killing Americans across the border into, El Paso, Texas, and Tijuana and Mexicali and places like that. So, coming across, snatching people, bringing them back into Mexico and murdering them. You can bet the United States would do something about that, right? I mean, you and I both know that no president could afford to just let that go. Oh, well, it's the price of doing business. We would have troops in Mexico taking care of that problem. And I mean, if you think about what happened after 9/11 and the people that died from 9/11, the people that died from the 20-year war that followed in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and other places, and the people that died in the fight that we only had, I think, 2 or 3 Americans that died in the fight against ISIS once they, declared their caliphate in Syria. But if you add up all those people, we have far more than that dying. I mean, orders of magnitude more. every year in the United States from illicit drugs, from drug overdoses. And this is being financed and enabled by foreign countries. So you've got money brokers that feed cartel production. They launder the proceeds, often with gold. And so you have a transnational terror ecosystem that is murdering Americans at scale. So what's being done about it now? Well, February 20th of this year, the State Department designated the Sinaloa Cartel, CJNG, Gulf Cartel, Cartel del Noroeste, La Nueva Familia Michoacana, Carteles Unidos, and others as foreign terrorist organizations. They also designated the Cartel de los Soles in Venezuela, which is made up of government officials and military officers that are very heavily involved in the cocaine trafficking that comes from Colombia into Venezuela and then onto the United States. Matter of fact, I have another map here that shows kind of how that works.
Where you're getting your maps from?
These maps came from Stratfor, I believe, and I just did a Google search for drug flows maps, but you can see here how Venezuela is not just sending drugs to the United States; they're sending it to Europe as well, to West Africa, and so designating these guys as foreign terrorist organizations allows under 18 U.S. Code allows the U.S. to unlock authority to do certain things that they didn't have before. So, like to go after, for example, the people who finance, who launder the money, anybody in the United States that's working with these cartels in any capacity, they can get arrested, they can get sanctioned, they can get their accounts frozen, all because of this FTO designation under Title 8 USC. There was also a use of force authority that 2025 House Joint Resolution 81 authorizes military force against certain Mexican cartels. It's a recognition that law enforcement only tools are not matched to this threat. Why? Because of jurisdiction. U.S. police officers have no jurisdiction in Mexico. So you have to get the military involved if they're going to go down there and do bad things to bad people or, end the threat, because there's no SWAT team in America that can jump on a helicopter and fly into Mexico and do that. So that use of force authority, House Resolution 81, is essentially a declaration of war against the Mexican cartels, at least. Now, under international law, military action outside the United States territory requires host nation consent or a valid rationale for self-defense under the Article 51 of the UN Charter. Now, what I have just laid out to you is exactly that valid self-defense rationale. The U.S. doesn't necessarily need to alert the Mexican authorities before we go in and start dropping bombs on bad guys, if we decide to do that. Now, so far, we have attempted to work within the system and work with the Mexican government, which is as corrupt as the cartels themselves. We have U.S. Special Operations troops in Mexico right now working with Mexican Marines to take out cartels. We've got lots and lots and lots of drones and surveillance aircraft that are flying around over Mexico and over Venezuela and other places in the Caribbean to try to find these guys. And so I wanted to show you this map here. What this shows is a Boeing KC-46 Alpha Pegasus, which is flying just off the coast of Venezuela. This was picked up here on, I forget which website this is, Skyscanner, I think. What this shows, KC-46 is a, well, there's two variants. Normally, a KC-46 is a refueling aircraft. This particular KC-46, I believe, has been retrofitted as a SIGINT platform, signals intelligence platform, which lets them pick up radio chatter, WhatsApp, and cell phone communications, and all sorts of other things from a couple miles up in the sky, right? So we're seeing an increase in the amount of intelligence collection that's taking place across Latin America by the United States. Now, what are they doing with all of that? I want to show you a little bit about, what might happen if the Trump administration gives the Pentagon the go-ahead to actually start taking kinetic action against cartels across the Western Hemisphere. Okay. Now, understand, I spent 8 years in the military, and so I'm, pretty well versed in how this works. But uh, there's a lot that goes into it's. It's not just like, okay, go find cartel guys and kill them. There's a tremendous amount of planning that goes into this, and there's an actual, they call it a kill chain, that the U.S. military, it's a continuum that they engage in, and it goes like this. Now, I do have a graphic of that. See if I can find it here. Um, I don't know if I have it easily. Where did I put it? I get so many of these things in here that there it is. Okay, so and of course it's way too big, so I got to make it smaller. Hang on a second. Let me get it the right size. I wish there was a quick way to do that. Probably is. I'm just not that well versed in OBS, which is the software that I use for this uh, this podcast. Okay, so let's take a look here. This is the continuum the U.S. military uses. It's called find, fix, finish, exploit, and analyze. I'm going to go through each one of those and help you understand how these work. All right. Find, fix, finish. And let's put my camera up there. So as I talk about this, you can take a look at this infographic and see how this works. Okay. Now, first you find the target that you get. So the U.S. military gets the order. That's step one. The order comes down. Somebody at a higher level, that could be the president, it could be a combatant commander, whatever. They decide, we want this bad guy to go away, or we want this group to, cease to function. And they give the order to pass that on to the intelligence and operations community, find this guy, track him, and get the trigger pullers lined up. Then comes I would call it the needle in the haystack phase, where they have to find the guy. And that's you can imagine pretty tough because we've pretty much gutted our human intelligence capabilities in the United States with the CIA and everything. And it's very difficult to rebuild. I think they're trying to rebuild it, but the CIA pivoted years ago to a more signals intelligence heavy uh, method of finding people. The problem is that narco traffickers and terrorists have figured that out, and they've realized that all I have to do is not use electronic communications and they can't find me. So we are now sending drones, satellites, these aircraft like the KC-46 or the E-7 aircraft to collect signals intelligence, listening to phones and radios and metadata from the internet and all that. We're trying to hire informants on the ground, undercover people going in and trying to find human intelligence. The goal is to figure out where the target lives and what is his pattern of life. Where does he sleep? Where does he drive? Where does he hide? Where does he meet with his team? So think of it like following somebody on social media, which all of us have probably done at one time. You sort of start to stalk people. Look at it, but do it in real time with cameras in the sky, and you have the ability to hack their phone, that kind of thing. Now, the MQ-9 Reapers are dual role aircraft. I got a video here that will explain a little more about how Reapers work, and I'm gonna play that now. So take a listen to this is a U.S. soldier who is explaining, or I think he's an airman, explaining what Reapers are capable of, and why they work so well for this mission. Take a listen. Whoop, that's just B-roll. That's not it.
So my name is Master Sergeant Thomas Anderson out of the 174th. I'm an FTD instructor for weapons. I instruct on the MQ-9 aircraft right now. This is basically the newest iteration of the drone program, starting back with the MQ-1s, rolled into the MQ-9s, kind of the future. A lot of things are going to this. No threat to the pilot, high endurance, it can stay in the air a long time, so there's a lot of benefit to that. Its big thing is endurance. It's a very fuel efficient aircraft, so with a full load of fuel, it can stay up for 20, 21 hours. And the nice thing with the pilots being in a GCS on the ground, they can just swap out as needed, so you don't have to worry about fatigue. Main missions are ISR. It can do attack missions as well, because it has a ground mapping radar in there. And they can do a lot of different things with that. It can target moving targets. And with that, we call it over the horizon. In other words, obviously the pilot can be here or in Pennsylvania and fly anywhere in the world. It has 4 stations that are weaponized. It has a total of 6 stations on the wings. There are 2 more outboard stations they could use, but those are for like special mission pods and sensors and things like that. But it does have 4 weapon stations. A lot of new capabilities coming with that, but right now it can carry the Hellfire missile, which a lot of people are familiar with that. It can carry 500-pound GPS-guided bombs, also laser-guided bombs, and soon we're getting a small diameter bomb, which is a new capability. They have a really large standoff range, so they can drop. The bomb can go like another 100 miles and hit the target, so the aircraft doesn't even have to go near the danger zone, so to speak. So our aircraft uses a rear-mounted engine. It's a pretty standard, it's a Honeywell turboprop engine. The same motor is used on a lot of civilian aircraft as well, but usually it's the other way around, facing forward, so we kind of gotta divert, air comes in, goes through the motor this way, and then diverts back out the back. It does have advantages to mounting it on the rear like this. For one, the prop doesn't obscure your camera view in the front. And then also, as the prop's spinning, the exhaust is going over the prop, so it's de-icing the prop, and then also the prop is dissipating your heat signature, so you're not as visible. You can tell they're putting a lot of resources into making it better. It's getting easier and easier, and a lot more capabilities.
So these things are extremely capable. They don't use the Predator drones anymore. They quit using those a few years ago. But the Reaper, they've got a couple of hundred of those in the U.S. inventory at any given time. and they can fly pretty much anywhere on planet Earth. And they are flown from like Elmendorf Air Base, or they're flown from, no, I'm sorry, um, uh, oh shoot, Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, places like that. So they can stay aloft for up to 30 hours. So you put one of those things up, they've got a very advanced suite of cameras and optics, thermal imaging, and all sorts of things. And so they go fly over areas of known cartel activity and start to identify, oh, there's a convoy of vehicles. Normally, civilians don't travel in convoys. So let's follow that and see where it's going. Oh, there's, looks like a lot of activity around this, uh, you know, jungle area that doesn't really have any industry or anything, but there's a lot of trucks coming up and leaving at various times to this little jungle site. And it's really hot down there because these processing of fentanyl and these different drugs, it creates a lot of heat. So thermal signatures, things like that. And that's how they find the targets. Okay, they can do some of that with satellites, some of it with signals intelligence, but that the real uh, workhorse in this is something like the MQ-9, because they can watch from 20 to 40,000 feet. Nobody knows they're there. Uh, and once they've narrowed down the target's pattern of life, then they pass it on to fixing. Now that they've found the person in general, or the organization in general, they have to pin them down in space and time, right here, right now. So they use what's called ISR. This is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Uh, ISR is done mainly by drones. They could orbit up there for days, like I said, and they watch the same area, the same safe house, the same, uh, warehouse, whatever, for several nights in a row. Now, when I got off active duty and spent another 4 years in the National Guard flying helicopters. And for one summer, I got a job flying for the counter drug program in Wisconsin. So we would fly around looking for marijuana growing in cornfields and stuff like that for the whole summer. It was a great, great job. It was fun. And then a couple times we got tasked. What we would do is we go pick up a couple of cops, narco cops, DEA guys or something, and then they would tell us where to go, and we would just fly them around. So we were more like the taxi drivers. But a couple times we got to go follow a suspect, and I got a chance to do this personally. So we went early in the morning, and we flew to this guy's house in Milwaukee. The guy claimed to be unemployed, but when you flew over his house, his backyard looked like Disneyland. He had water slides and swimming pools and hot tubs and jacuzzis and gazebos and just like all kinds of stuff back there. So obviously this guy had a lot of money, and they had determined that he uh, visited several different banks every week and deposited large amounts of cash, much more than an unemployed guy would likely make. So they wanted to know, okay, where is this guy growing his stuff? And we flew out there early in the morning, right at sunup, and then hovered over his house at 6,000 feet, which for a tiny little OH-58 scout helicopter, which is basically a Bell Jet Ranger, and I recall we had the doors off, was A, freezing, and B, really scary because normally we don't fly that high. But we wanted to be up high enough so that the noise didn't alert the guy on the ground. And we just stayed up there and they just watched him. Now they had some ground units as well. And so we saw the guy come out and get in his car and take off. And then we started following him in the helicopter. And we followed this guy as he went around to various different banks and everything. And then he took off out of Milwaukee heading west. And at times the DEA ground units would pull up and shadow him for a while. and we'd hang back some, and then at times they'd pull off and we'd get closer and watch. So as we followed him, we found that he went to this farm out in a rural area outside of Milwaukee. With a thermal imaging camera on our helicopter, we looked at the farm, and one of the barns in the farm just lit up like a Christmas tree. And so, flying over the farm, we didn't see any marijuana being grown outside, but it was pretty plain to see with the thermal imager that the guy was growing something inside. So later on, they determined that he had like routed the electricity around the meter so that the meter didn't give him away, and he was using tremendous amounts. He had a huge indoor grow, and they ended up busting the guy. And it was at that time the largest marijuana bust in Wisconsin history, and we all got medals, and so it was pretty cool. But that's the kind of thing that they do, that they will be doing and are doing in Mexico right now and in Venezuela. So they are fixing the people that are heading up these organizations, finding out where they are right now. And then they're going to cross check that. And they're going to make sure that's the guy. Are we sure there aren't any civilians in there with him? That's called positive identification, or PID, PID. Now, you don't fire at somebody until you are sure you have the right guy. All right. Then you pass it on, once PID is established, to the operators. And the operators are tasked with finishing the target. So find, fix, finish. As they finish the target, how that happens depends on a lot of factors, but they could do it with an airstrike. A Reaper could launch a Hellfire missile, or one of those small diameter bombs that he was talking about in that piece. Those are very small 250-pound bombs that have a very much smaller blast radius, that think blowing up a car instead of a whole city block or something. Not a building, but an apartment in the building, that sort of thing. So, or maybe a fighter jet, an F-15, drops a GBU-39 on the guy if it's a bigger target, something like that. We could theoretically send in a gunship. There are gunships like the AC-130J model. They call it a Ghost Rider. And I actually have video of that I can show you while we're talking. I don't think there's any audio to this, so I'll just keep talking over it. This is the AC-130. They used to call these a Spectre gunship, okay? But this is a newer model. The Spectre gunship, for example, had 20 millimeter cannons. This one has a 30 millimeter Bofors cannon. It has both of them, the old one and the new one, have a 105 millimeter howitzer, so an actual artillery piece in the sky. There's those 30 millimeter. These things fire very fast. That's a Vulcan cannon there. So those things, that shows you, what they can do. And obviously there's a lot of firepower in one of those AC-130s. Back when they were called Puff the Magic Dragon, the first iteration of those in Vietnam, they said that the chain gun on that thing could fire, not chain gun, the Vulcan cannon on that thing could fire, they could put a bullet in every square inch of a football field within 1 minute. It's like 5,000 rounds a minute. I mean, just unbelievable. And I worked with the Spectre gunships a lot when I was in the military. We would do joint operations with them where we would learn to call in fire and tell them where to shoot. And we could, use laser target designators or things like that. Show them where we were using a lasso technique with a laser. You just take a infrared laser and you kind of act like you're making a lasso in the sky. And the AC-130 can see that with their night vision goggles, and then they can pinpoint where you are so they don't shoot you. Okay. But I, that might be a little overkill for strikes in Mexico. The problem with those things is that they fly relatively low and slow and could be shot down. The cartels are very heavily armed, and they've been known to shoot down Mexican aircraft in the past. They've shot down helicopters more than once. So they might not want to send an AC-130 Juliet model in there, but I mean, they could. It's possible. On top of that, other options, if let's say they want to take the guy alive, they might send in Delta Force or the Navy SEALs to hit the house at night and grab the guy. But in all cases, there's going to be a stack of aircraft. There's going to be a drone that's watching. There's going to be a jet or another drone with firepower, maybe a gunship on call in case things go bad, and a refueling tanker, CH-46. I mean, C-46 in the background, ready to refuel all those other aircraft. So I'm just telling you all that to help you understand how complex a dance this is. It's not as easy as just dropping a bomb on somebody, just send a jet and go drop a bomb on them. We have to have a quick reaction force on call in case one of those aircraft that's piloted gets shot down, and we've got to go in and rescue a pilot. We've got to have, just medical personnel on call. There's a lot that goes into this planning. Okay, so once they do make a raid, let's say that they do decide they want to take somebody alive. So they're not just going to drop a warhead on him. They're going to send in the special forces. They would not just be looking to pick up people. They're not going to just go and kick in the door and snatch a guy and throw him on a helicopter and get him out of there. If they go in something like that, they're going to be bagging laptops, phones, papers, any kind of intelligence they can, because that is exactly what they will use for the next strike and the one after that and the one after that. If it's a drone strike, another drone might go in to scoop up what's left. They might send in some local Mexican forces to pick up hard drives, IDs, take biometric samples. Every bit of that material that's picked up goes back into that find, fix, finish cycle to map the next target. Once they get that intelligence, then they have to go into the analyze phase. They're going to learn and refine and prepare for the next target. So they sift through the wreckage. Did we get the right guy? Who did he talk to? What was in his phone? Who shows up at his funeral? All of that feeds back into the cycle, gives us new leads and new finds, new fixes. So all that to say that the kill chain is not just one and done. It is a continuous cycle that puts pressure on these networks and dismantles them node by node. Does that make sense? So this helps the United States make their strikes count. They are precise, they're repeatable. So we're not just going to go in carpet bomb an area. This is hunting in its most complex form. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved in every mission, from the planning phase to the execution. And then they finish the job with the minimum amount of force needed so that they can minimize civilian casualties and collateral damage. So now I've got up the questions here. I just want to check and see how long we've been going. What's that? Yeah, it's about time to do questions. Okay, before I do questions, though, I want to go to the map again because, well, folks, we got over 1,000 people watching. Please do me a favor and go hit that like button. Also, don't forget, you can go to chuckholton.com chuckholton.com, Holton. And you can sign up over there for additional updates, additional content that we're producing. You get early access to stuff that we're putting up on YouTube eventually, like the report I just did on Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier in Haiti. That went up on Locals first, and it's going up on YouTube after this live is finished. So go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there, and you can help kind of keep us in the field doing what we do. I've got, why do I have a couple different chat boxes up? That's confusing. Okay, so let's go to the map real quick because I want to talk about one of the places that might get targeted as we sort of wrap this up. This red dot you see here on the map of Mexico represents a port called Manzanillo. And this is one of the main ports where drugs come in and then get shipped cross country over land to the north. Okay, this is in Jalisco state of Mexico. If you look right down here, this is the port. And if we go to the satellite image, wait, there's the port right there. You can see some ships, some containers, things like that. This whole town is essentially owned by the cartel. And nothing comes in or out without them knowing about it and approving it. The federal government of Mexico has very little presence in this area. And so from there, it's a straight shot north up to the U.S. southern border. They can reach Brownsville, Texas. They can reach, Nogales, Tijuana, El Paso, you name it. Any place on the U.S. southern border from there. But so if we are going to see kinetic strikes against the cartels, that's one place where we could do it. The U.S. could start dropping bombs on this port down here or on some of the ships coming and going. It wouldn't be too difficult to track ships coming out of the, Colombian coast coming up here. They likely would not be coming from Venezuela because Venezuela doesn't have any coastline. They'd have to go through the Panama Canal. But they certainly can come from these places like Buenaventura here in Colombia. Actually, I was looking at doing a contract in Buenaventura this year, and I didn't win the contract, but that's a pretty dangerous area. There's ports all along this western coast of Colombia, down into Ecuador, Peru, you name it. And then there's ports on the other side that can come out of Caracas or Maracaibo in Venezuela and make their way up. A lot of them come through Haiti. I've actually seen this with my own eyes. They'll come into the southern coast of Haiti in Jacmel and then move overland to Port-au-Prince here, going up over the mountains on 4x4s. I've actually seen this. I've been there and watched this happen. Then from Port-au-Prince, it's an easy, quick hop to Miami or, the coast of Florida. And there's a lot of traffic in there. So there's no shortage of targets, but I want to say, don't be surprised if there are kinetic strikes if they're not all in Mexico. It wouldn't surprise me to see the first strikes taking place in Venezuela. And as I mentioned last night, the Venezuelan government under Nicolas Maduro says that they're preparing for war. They believe that there will be war between the United States and Venezuela. At least that's what they're telling their people. And I got this kind of funny video, it's a little long for my taste, but I want to show it to you. This is a video that was put out by the Venezuelan government yesterday. And I've translated it to English so you can understand what they're saying. It was all in Spanish, of course, and that's why the English is a little weird because of the way it got translated. But listen, and you can see that they are mobilizing for war with the United States in Venezuela. Watch this.
My commander-in-chief, this deployment is to guarantee peace, security, and the integrity of Caracas families. We have seen how progressively in all territories the peace squadrons have been deployed in harmony with the communal circuits. Today, it is the turn of the capital city. I want my commander-in-chief to know that the Integral Defense Operational Zone within the framework of the 70s and specifically the 30 of transformation, which relates to security and defense, we are confident that we are coming to strengthen the territorial defense system. We are going to perfect the perfect fusion of the people, military, and police, but we are also going to ensure an excellent intelligence and counterintelligence system in our communities, especially today in the...
You can just tell when somebody's living in a dictatorship because this is the kind of language that they use when you're making a report to a dictator who could have you disappeared if he's not happy with what you're saying. It's so common to hear this kind of talk from people in communist countries and dictatorships.
Face of the imperial threats that loom over us.
The imperial threats.
I want my commander-in-chief to know from the Integral Defense Operational Zone number 81, with all its people, with all its citizen security organizations, and with the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, but especially with the Bolivarian militia, we want to tell the world that we are not willing to give up an inch of this land. We are determined to continue being free and independent.
Free and independent. Wait, which country are you in again? Hold on. Are you saying that from Venezuela? Now, obviously, the United States does not want to take over Venezuela. We're not going to invade Venezuela and take ground in Venezuela. So this is doubly ridiculous. But that statement was just gold right there. We're going to continue to be free and independent. Okay.
Commander-in-Chief, we proceed to deploy the 299 peace squadrons with all the personnel. Attention! Fire!
Fire! Yeah, so these are cops.
Turn on the units for deployment to guarantee our people of Caracas as our oath, peace, security, tranquility, advance.
Okay, that's enough of that. It just shows you that that is political theater extraordinaire. Obviously, that was something that was put together by the government of Venezuela to show to the Venezuelan people, because one thing that has to happen in a dictatorship is that the dictator has to continue to sell himself to his people and say, yes, I have total control and I can make your whole family disappear, but you want me here because look at all that I'm doing for you, that kind of thing. So, and for somebody who comes from an actual free country, it is pretty humorous to watch that take place. Okay, so let's go on to our. Let's see, I gotta find, nope, not that. Our questions, live questions document here. I gotta refresh it. Okay. Michael Gigi said, will no available drugs increase alcohol abuse? Perhaps. I'm not sure. I mean, what's the point? Does that mean, well, we shouldn't get rid of criminals because then other people might be tempted to become criminals. But I mean, we should do whatever we can to make America safe and healthy, and getting rid of drugs is not a bad thing, even if it increases the amount of alcohol people drink. Timothy Atkinson says, so why don't we get the Mexican military to do the battle against the cartels? Because the Mexican military are practically wholly owned by the cartels. The cartels, especially in the higher ranks of the military, they operate by this plomo or plata, uh, policy. Plomo being lead, plata being silver, meaning they go to the commanders of the military and even many of the politicians and say, we will offer you $100,000 or we'll kill your family. Either way, you're going to work for us. And those guys feel like they don't have any choice because it's either die, get lead in the form of bullets coming at you, or silver in the form of money coming at you. Either way, the cartel gets what they want. Broski Bear says, Chuck, do we officially declare war on Venezuela with the intent of setting up a new government in Venezuela, or is declaring war not necessary? No, this would not be. We haven't actually declared war since what? 19 World War II? Did we declare war in Korea? I think that was also a police action. So we haven't declared war. And why would we start now? It's been decades. Tizra Pinto says, should the U.S. fight cartels even if the countries they're based in don't recognize the cartels as terrorist organizations like Brazil? Yeah, I made a case under international law where we could say this is a valid self-defense issue on the part of the United States. We're not going to go in and strike at the military of Brazil or the military of Venezuela, but we are going to come in and blow up known cartel headquarters, processing sites, whatever. And if you don't like it, then you do something about it. If you don't, we will. There you go. Betts Sillers Anderson says, do cartels use drugs themselves? No, not usually. Broski Bear says, how complicit is whoever's deleting those questions after I put them in, please stop. Because it jumps it away and I have to scroll back down to it. Chuck, how complicit is the current Mexican government? I understand that Maduro has been in the news lately, but what about Sheinbaum and her government? Well, we are working with Sheinbaum to some extent. We're passing them intelligence and saying, all right, you say that you want to do something about this. Here's something you need to do something about. And we're gauging the effectiveness of working with Sheinbaum. Now, Sheinbaum has said Mexican national and territorial sovereignty must be respected, and we will not allow U.S. military into our country to perform strikes. And to that, I think the Pentagon might say, you and what army? Because if we want to come in and make strikes, we're going to come in and make strikes. And what are you going to do? Are you going to shoot artillery at Tijuana or at San Diego? Everybody knows that wouldn't end well for Mexico. So Mexico's not going to retaliate against the United States militarily. They're just not. And I can tell you from having spoken with lots of people in Mexico, everybody knows that Sheinbaum is she is owned by the cartels. She can do almost nothing without the cartel's approval. There are investigative journalists who have tracked all this down. Oscar Blue Ramirez has done a great job at exposing the corruption that is endemic in the government of Mexico. So yes. George Smith says, where did you find the map? I think I answered that one. Strap 4 was where I got that map, I believe. Engineer for Life says, what are the changes? What are the chances we try to implement a regime change in Venezuela? Low. I don't think that there is a $50 million reward on the Venezuelan leader's head. He's not the president. He did not win the last election, but he refused to cede power. So there, as I said yesterday, there is some precedent for the United States going in and removing an illegitimate dictator. I myself took part in the invasion of Panama to do that with Manuel Noriega. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think it might be more likely that Eric Prince's new organization, he started up a new private military contractor company. Somebody like that might say, for $50 million, we'll figure out how to go snatch that guy. And they'll just go do it. But it would not be easy because Maduro has surrounded himself with Wagner mercenaries, people like that, not his own troops. Michael Gigi says, do you have an idea on how to curb the want need of the U.S. user? Well, there's the cynical way and the pragmatic way. The cynical way would be to secretly lace some of the fentanyl that we capture at the U.S. southern border with, some sort of poison, as if it's not poisonous enough. And that would end up killing a whole bunch of Americans. And then Americans would get so angry that they would demand the government do something about it. But as it turns out, that's actually been done. I mean, the cartels themselves are lacing the stuff with so much fentanyl that it is killing 100,000 people in the United States. And there's been barely a whimper from the U.S. public. So that likely wouldn't work. I mean, aside from converting people to Christianity, and I really think that the biggest lever that the U.S. government has to push to reduce the demand for drugs is to reduce the supply. It's one of those you build it and they will come kind of things. If you flood the streets of America with illicit drugs and they're easy to get and cheap, then more people are going to do it. If you make them very dangerous to get without getting arrested, and you make them harder to get a hold of, fewer people are going to do drugs. And so that's what the government should focus on. Sean Howard says, do you think we will go all out war with Venezuela? No, I don't think so. Venezuela, if they mobilize 4.5 million people like they say they're going to, and we send in our 4,000 Marines, that would be about a fair fight. I mean, the quality of the 4.5 million people that Venezuela could come up with to fight would be so low as to be comical. I mean, their active duty military is already comical compared to the U.S. military. So I wouldn't worry about all out war. That would be over in about 2 days. Icky Weinstein says, I don't know much about collecting intel. How do they collect your telephone and WhatsApp info? They have signals intelligence that can, so various ways they can do this. In Afghanistan, one of the ways we did it is we would send undercover agents, let's say, from the DEA into areas of Afghanistan and have them climb up the cell phone towers in the middle of the night and attach devices to the cell phone antennas that would route all of the communications that hit that cell phone antenna through that device, and that device would then broadcast all that information to a server that was controlled by the DEA. And then they have artificial intelligence algorithms that can sift through those mountains of data and can pick out code words like, whatever code word you want, and pick out names and even identify voices. Then the AI comes up with a preliminary target list that then they employ other means of intel collection like the MQ-9 Reapers and things like that to go collect. There are also devices Actually, Panama bought one from Israel years ago, and it caused all kinds of problems. But there are devices you can purchase from, governments can purchase that will scour the internet and like get everything there is to know about you. If they point it at you, somebody has to type your name into that device, and it will just comb the internet and get your it'll crack your email, it'll download all your emails, it'll crack your bank accounts, it'll get into everything, and they can, I mean, that's why nothing that you put on the internet is ever private. Whether it's in a private message, whether it's a WhatsApp chat, whether it's email, doesn't matter. Nothing you put on the internet is truly private. Mendola, thank you for the 199 there, asks, where does Cuba fit into this equation? Well, Cuba has so many of its own problems that they're not near as involved in the drug trafficking and that sort of thing, cartels. The Cuban government does give some assistance to Venezuela, however, and so in that way they're sort of indirectly involved. Okay, Lance Lambrecht says from Oklahoma, could the U.S. take out the Chinese ships before they reach their destination? That would be a wonderful thing to see. Yes, we could. Would we? Maybe not. But those mysterious explosions that keep happening in Iran over the last several months? There could start to be some mysterious explosions and fires at sea with some of these ships. And I mean, plausible deniability. They could just spontaneously combust. Must be alien space lasers or something. I don't know. Who knows? The U.S. has the wherewithal to do things like that. We just don't really have the inclination to do so. Maybe under the Trump administration that will change, but I've been pretty disappointed with the U.S. military over the last, say, 4, 8, 12 years since Barack Obama took office, because they've gotten more and more risk averse, and really I hate to say it, but in terms of the top brass, cowardly, just downright cowardly. And they put far more impetus on turning the military into a grand social experiment than they have into turning the military into a very lethal fighting force. Fortunately, I love to see that is changing under Pete Hegseth. I hope that he stays on for the entire 4 years. Hopke says, could Hezbollah's operations in the Western Hemisphere have anything to do with their lack of action in Lebanon since the pager attack? No, I think that the Israelis decimated Hezbollah to the point that they are still reeling. They're on the back foot. They were hurt worse than they say that they were, even worse than most people realize. And so they still have illicit activities happening in Venezuela and other places across Latin America. A lot of those activities are centered around making money through illegal means or legal means, and then funneling that money to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So if the United States decides to strike inside Venezuela, maybe they ought to think about striking at Hezbollah targets as well in Venezuela to cut off the money supply for Hezbollah elsewhere. And this is, so I guess to wrap all that up, what that shows is that this issue is not just a national security issue for the United States. This is a global security issue. And if the United States does give the go-ahead to our military to strike at the cartels, we will be doing the entire planet a favor. And I think that it would fit very nicely with President Trump's desire to be seen as a peacemaker, because sometimes you have to use violence to bring peace. And that's the only way it can happen. Okay, thank you very much for watching the Hot Zone, folks. One more thing I want to show you. Okay, Nico says, Chuck, does America have direct energy weapons? We're testing them, but we don't have them in practice or in what am I trying to say? They have not been deployed yet. Okay, one more thing I want to show you, folks. I've been here in Armenia for several weeks, and Armenia is just such an amazing place. We are doing a tour to Armenia June 13th through the 23rd of next year. You can join us on that tour. You can travel with me and my wife and see some absolutely stunning stuff. I want to show you one of those places that we visit on our tours today because I found this drone footage. This is Noravank. It's called New Church. This is a 1,300-year-old church, and it's called the New Church in Armenia because it's only 1,300 years old. But it's up in a canyon in the south of Armenia, and it is spectacularly beautiful. Just so great. And so it's one of the many places that we will show you on our tour, and I highly recommend that you join us. There are still slots available for couples, especially. We love bringing couples, so why don't you get you and your significant other together, or bring your kids, whatever you want. It's a fun, safe, beautiful place. The food is great. The company is great. And it really is a once in a lifetime adventure. So if you're interested, just go to holtonnews.com. And I think there's a link there. What? Oh, the link is pinned right now in the chat. And we'll put it in the description as well if you're watching this after the live ended. So go to that link there and get your slot for our trip to Armenia next June. You won't regret it, I promise. Okay, God bless you. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time. My granddaughter fell asleep watching me. Yeah, I have that effect on women.